Well, happy Friday. I hope I think we saw all four seasons that we typically say in a year. We saw them in one morning. So that was some wild rain, and hopefully the sun looks like the sun's shining now. But anyways, we're there. We're on a Friday and coming into the weekend. I want to welcome you. I'm Chud Wendell, and today the Commercial Property Council is going to be hosting a great and I think insightful conversation that really is about the community and public safety and trying to keep our community safe. So I'm looking forward to that. Just a couple little minor tidbits and housekeeping things and updates. So please, with questions, I'm assuming we're going to have quite a few questions. We've already had some, and I've submitted some both to Chief Meidel as well as Prosecutor Haskell. But please use chat, and we'll try to do a good job on trying to stay up on those, and I'll be able to share those or summarize them if there's a theme and pull them together so that we can ask those questions. I think that's the key part of this. But use chat for that, please. We'll try to keep it to an hour. Both Larry and Craig shared with me that it isn't a hard stop at 2 o'clock. So if we're going over a little bit, we might push it, but please obviously feel free to drop off anytime. So what are we? The Commercial Property Council is really like a neighborhood council. The goal is to assist city agencies in determining priority needs. Well, here we are with our law enforcement as being a big part of it. So that is what our goal is. Currently, we're about 900, just over 975 Facebook group members. If you're not on, I would encourage you to look at that. It's a Spokane Business and Commercial Property Council, it's pretty active. So I'd encourage you to do that. And we have over 450 on an email distribution. Once again, let me know. You can get me through Facebook, email, and send me a message if you want to be added to that distribution list, and I'll add you. We've also had pretty good media coverage. There's a new publication out there called The Center Square. I would encourage you, if you have a chance to look at it, thecentersquare.com, Washington. And they've been doing a good job. They're really trying to cover the middle of the road and do full reporting on the whole issue. So there's been some coverage off of the work we've been doing, and they've been doing a lot of work with the city, following up with the city. Ray Lynn is the reporter here. And then CREM has been active and KXLY has been active. So I'm hopeful that we continue to keep that media, out there and telling the whole story. And I do appreciate those that want to cover the whole story. Once again, no politics, no agendas, no BS. It's truth. And so we're trying to preach is the truth and to get there. So that's why we're here convening today and being able to have that conversation with two very important people in the community. And then finally, I want to encourage you, if you haven't seen the announcement, Hello for Good is a foundation that is hosting a symposium on May 10th, and it starts at 8:30. It's at the Grand Hotel. It's free, and it's purely they're bringing in experts from San Diego, where they've actually moved the needle, and they're going to talk about what have they done, what are the best practices, what's worked, what's not working. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. I'm hopeful that they'll be well attended, and hope to see you there. And then also within that email that I sent out earlier this week, there was a link for Mayor Woodward's Homeless Plan 2.0. She announced that at her State of the City last week, and it's very comprehensive. I know and as she said it's not a complete book. This is this is going to be something that's going to be very fluid and adjust and adapt, and yet it is a plan that we can all put our arms around, and I'm excited about to be able to embrace and have a vision, that we can work from the same song sheet on. And then Hello for Good, as I already mentioned, they have a website, helloforgood.org. If you want more information, go there, and it's a great website. And then I mentioned our Facebook page, and then Back the Blue 509. That's another Facebook page. Good timing for that announcement with the chief coming on today. But they're talking all things police and law enforcement, the great things that the law enforcement's doing, the great things the foundation's doing, the challenges they're facing. It's just a great Facebook page. And then next month, June 2nd at 11 a.m., we'll be having Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich speak to this group. And his focus and topic will be on the county campus modernization and looking at the Geiger replacement facility. So this is looking at what does our community need when it comes to a facility to rehabilitate both criminals, those that are addicted, those that have mental health issues, So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and I'm excited that he's going to be able to share that with what is in the works right now. So more to come there. And then communication, it's really email or Facebook. We're pretty organic and pretty grassrootsish, and I just invite you to communicate. If you're not on social media like Sheldon Jackson, he hides from that stuff. That's fine. Email. He does some emailing, and you can always get on his email distribution as well. So with that, I am going to introduce Colin Tracy. Colin is the city of Spokane's policy advisor. So he's in the mayor's office, and I was hoping that he would be able to give an update, what's happening on the East Trent shelter and what's in store as far as the timeline. So Colin, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Chad. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to kind of give, like you said, a quick timeline of what to expect coming up next for Trent. As you guys know, that we tried to get a rezoning passed a couple weeks ago. We're going to make another attempt at that. This time we're going to go through the normal process, so it will not be an emergency. So what that looks like is this upcoming Monday at the Urban Experience Committee. It will be introduced for discussion first off, and then it will be briefed at the Monday briefing for a first reading on what is that? That's May 16th, and then the first reading will be May 16th, and then May 23rd will be the second reading and the vote for the Trent or the rezoning to allow for shelters and heavy industrial zoning. So the 23rd will be the vote. It will take 30 days to go into effect after that vote takes place. So that's the timeline on the rezoning. There is, as you guys may have seen, the RFP went out today. The second RFP went out today. It was a little bit different than the first one. We're asking for 2 different subject types. So we're asking for someone that can run the operations of the facility, and then another one that can do the services. As you may have seen in the reporting, we will start off with an initial minimum of 150 beds, scaling to a minimum of 250 as demand, and with additional surge capacity due to any inclement weather that we might have. On top of that, the lease agreement is still being discussed and negotiated, so we are making progress on that front. And then Johnny and the mayor and others in the administration are still in constant communication with the businesses around there to make sure that we are accommodating for any security needs that they have. The 2 biggest ones have been risk to their assets and then safety risk to their employees. So we want to make sure that we're doing due diligence with them and we're staying on top of that. So Chad, that was quick, but that's kind of where we stand right now. So 23rd is when it will be in front of council for a vote as of right now.
Hey, Colin, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. And if anybody has any questions for Colin or want more information on that, use chat and he'll respond. So thank you, Colin, and thanks to the administration for staying strong on this one. And so with that, I want to maximize as much time as possible that we can with our presenters today. And what we're going to do is we're really going to try to carve out about 40 minutes, 20 minutes for each. But I want it to be a conversation, and I really want it to be something that is a community conversation. So we'll try to go with like 20 minutes for the chief, and then 20 minutes with the prosecutor. But I know either of them, they're very sharp in both their fields. If you have places where you want to chime in, like Larry, you want to chime in on the chief's, a comment that he's made, please do so. Feel free. I want it to be a conversation. But really, what we're looking at is, what is going on out there in public safety? What are the statistics? What are the trends? What's this impact on drug decriminalization? Where are we at? What's that doing to our law enforcement? What's it doing to society? And then Washington State law enforcement reforms, where are we at and where do we need to go? And then finally, we'll obviously hear about the criminal justice system. Is it working? Is it broken? Do we have a revolving door? What can we do to help you, Larry, to really shine some more light on the criminal justice system? So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Spokane Police Department Chief Craig Meidel. Craig has been our police chief since 2016. He's been with our department since 1994. And when you want to say you want somebody that's experienced within the department, promoted from within, we got the guy right here. He has done it all, everything from a patrol officer to lieutenant to he even did some work with a police ombudsman's office, been captain precincts, the North Side precinct. It goes on and on. But some unique things about Craig: one, he's got a master's in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University. That was in 2012. And then he's got a BA in law and justice, surprise, surprise, from Central Washington University in 1993. But in addition, we're going to find out we have two that have served our country well. Craig served as a United States Marine Corps active reserves from 1989 to 1995. So with that, Craig, I appreciate what you do. I appreciate your service, and I really appreciate you being here. I'll turn it over to you, and you should be able to share screen. I'm going to take my share off. Oh, Craig, are you there?
There we go. All right.
There you go. All right.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, give me 1 second here. I'm going to go to, and I just want to make sure, can you all see my screen? Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I see the files. So there's different files.
Okay. So it shows I'm sharing the screen. You don't see the, at the top, it says Spokane Police Department, our CompStat report.
What I see is your file folder, like there's different files within here.
Okay. Let's see here. It says I'm sharing my screen. Dock to the bottom. Okay, so on my screen, I show my first slide, and you all are not seeing that, it looks like.
I am not, no. I'm wondering if you hit stop share again and try opening up that actual.
It does. Okay, let me try that one more time here. And
there you go.
You guys can see that now?
Yep.
All right. There we go. Okay, so you see at the top it says Spokane Police Department. Okay, good. All right, so Judd said only 20 minutes. I've got a lot of material I'm going to go over. I'm going to talk fast. I'm going to ask you all to listen fast. And then I will go just real quick through this, and definitely happy to answer any questions, and please interrupt. So every week we post on our website our CompStat report, comparative statistics reports. And so anyone has access to this. We break it down by district, so you can look at downtown, district 1, 2, or 3. This is for the city overall. And when you're looking at the far right, you'll see the right column, white TD. This is year to date this year compared to the same time frame last year. And as you're looking down the list there, you'll see that overall violent crime for the year up 1.97%, so about 2%. It's up a little bit more. Commercial robberies are up a little bit more. And then we get down to the property crime, you'll see at the bottom, 35% property crimes up 35%. That 31% is all of those index crimes that we report to the FBI. I will tell you, in a conversation I had recently with someone else about our violent crime, these are not felonies. When you're looking at that top, I'm sorry, these are only felonies. So when you're looking at the top, this is none of your misdemeanor assaults, fourth-degree assaults, things like that. These are all strictly felony crimes. I want to show you this real quick. When you're looking at the work that SPD has done going back to 2017, you'll see that trend line, that 5-year trend line. We got a nice downward trend on our violent crime. And over here on the right, a nice downward trend on our property crime. A lot of reasons behind that. A lot of it has to do with our focused efforts on our repeat offenders, working what we used to call hot spots. We now call them mission spots, which is when you all call in, and some people understandably get very frustrated because they feel like, I don't hear from you, you don't do anything. Well, we take crime analysis, takes every single call that comes in and makes what's called a heat map. They will look at the crimes within that heat map and where you see the densely colored crimes occurring. And we will make what we call missions every week, and we will assign officers during their proactive time, where they're not going to calls, to go and work those mission areas as well, constantly refining what we're doing. So the challenge has become, again, when you look at, I know you've heard about police reforms, when you look at the middle of 2021 on violent crime, you'll see the huge spike initially last year after the reforms went into effect. And then we kind of bob up and down that 5-year trend line. I'm looking at violent crime and seeing more of the trend since last July above the 5-year trend line than below. So we obviously know violent crime is increasing. When you go over here and look at property crime, though, again, going back to July of 2021, you'll see, man, what a great downward trend. Spokane has a real struggle with property crimes, but we were making an impact. And then middle of July of last year, you'll see we are consistently above that 5-year trend line. And we see those property crime numbers continue to increase. Speaking of reforms, I did want to, one of the things WASPIC has said, WASPIC is the Washington Sheriff's Police Chiefs Association. Director Strand was the former sheriff for King County, chief of police for Bellingham, chief of police for Kent. He now oversees WASPIC, and WASPIC represents all of the chiefs and sheriffs within the state of Washington. So you have about 240 police chiefs, 39 sheriffs. He is the one who represents all of us, including with the legislators. So one of the things he pointed out a couple months ago in a press release was the amount of resistance law enforcement is experiencing has absolutely skyrocketed. It's at levels we've never seen. I will say, in fairness, it's across the nation, but especially in Washington. So let me see if I can get this to play here.
Open the door and talk to you, please.
It's a traffic stop. Okay, so you'll see that. Oh, hold on a second. You'll see that driver backed into a patrol car, pulled into the car in front, and then it drove off. Because there's no officer in that car, officers were not allowed and still are not allowed by state law to pursue that person. So he or she just ran 2 vehicles, fled. Officers are not allowed by law to go after and pursue her. So again, you'll see a separate incident, a totally different night, rammed the car behind, rammed the car in front. Your tax dollars are paying to repair the damage to those vehicles. Again, because of the change in the pursuit laws, officers were not allowed to pursue. That's considered property damage. And again, so thousands of dollars, officers by law are required to sit there and watch that person drive away. Okay, this one is an individual that one of our proactive teams had located, had been searching for a while. This is in a big box store parking lot. Individual has 2 felony warrants for his arrest. And this was shortly after the laws were implemented last year.
Kirby. You should look like James Kirby. James, don't reach in your car, bud. Don't reach in your car. Won't you turn around, put your hands on top of your head for me. You have a warrant for your arrest, James. What's that? If you're not James Kirby, I'll let you go, but I think you are. I think you're James. Put your stuff on top of your hood. I'm not going to play games with you, buddy. Don't get in your car and drive into my car. I'm not going to like that very much. James, you have 2 felony warrants for your arrest, sir. Are you James Kirby, yes or no? Are you sure about that? You sure look like James. What are you talking about? Right now, you're not free to leave so I can verify your identity. Yes, I can, sir. I know my legal authority. You sure look like the guy I'm looking for. And so I can verify you're not him. You're gonna be not free to leave. That's how this works. No, you're not. I'm telling you right now, you're not free to leave. What do you mean you're sorry? That is how it works. They didn't change the law, sir. What is your name, sir? If you're not James Kirby, what's your name? It's not? Okay. James Kirby, who you look just like, operates this motor vehicle. Right now, you're making me very nervous, which is why my firearm is drawn, because you make me very nervous. You dug it. I'm just letting you know. It's not what I said at all, did I? I don't want you to reach into your car anymore. You're not leaving, sir. If you leave this, you're going to be arrested for attempt to elude. How does that? You make me feel unsafe because you're uncooperative and you reached into your car once already. I'm going to check our Hey, back up.
Okay, so I just confirm you all can still hear me. Okay, that's in line with what officers across the state are seeing. This is what your officers here in Spokane are dealing with literally every single day. I had a 52-year-old officer walk in my office 2 weeks ago and he said, "Chief, I am done this fall." He said a couple of years ago, if you told someone you're not free to leave, they would comply, they would stay there. He said now they're fighting more and more. And he said, he's getting tired from doing it. I do want to show you. Okay, can you guys see this where it says focus on the upper left portion of the video? Can you see that on the screen?
I don't think I see it.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, then I'm going to share again. There, can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see, can you see my cursor moving?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the same incident. You're going to see Officer LaQuire pull into this parking lot and the suspect's vehicle is parked right here. So this is what it looks like from the surveillance cameras. There's a police car with lights. Now look at this pedestrian here, getting ready to walk. This is the suspect shoving that car as he's driving forward, backs into this vehicle, and then flees. And that's Officer LaQuire in pursuit. So that's what you cannot see. I will tell you that based on the state laws, this again occurred last year. That officer was outside policy because the state law had changed because there was only damage to the vehicles. So that officer was outside of policy for that pursuit. By state law, he was required to let that person flee. And I don't know if you saw that person that was almost hit in that area as well. So let me go back to. Okay, and confirm you all can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now do you see where it says, are we on a different screen, accidental deaths comparison?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to talk fast. I'm already over where I wanted to be at this point.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
We talked about drugs, the legalization of drugs. If you look at, this is Spokane County. This is directly from the medical examiner's report. Anyone can access this. We don't have the 2021 data yet. Go back to 2014, about 8 years ago, we had 30 overdose deaths in the county of Spokane. Fast forward to 2020, again, that's the latest date. We have had over 3 times as many overdose deaths in 2020. So that has me concerned, obviously, because we have, in essence, legalized drugs until the third contact. That third contact, if we catch someone with drugs, it is a citation and release. The first 2 times we're required to refer them to services, and I'll get into a little bit more info. So forgive me for bouncing around. I just want to cover all of this just to open up the conversation later on as well. One of our officers, Officer Berkeley, works north, decided to take it upon himself to go to about 13 businesses north and ask what their shrinkage is. As businesses, you know, shrinkage is a nice way of saying what has disappeared. And when you go and you look at the total cost of shrinkage, shoplifting, theft, just to break it down, Big Lots 105, Dick's 150,000, TJ Maxx over $500,000, Bath and Body Works said 16, but it's likely a lot more. Target over $350,000. We go down to Best Buy, $250,000, Safeway 110,000, Walmart up north $1.5 million, Home Depot 1.2 million. These are repeat offenders. These are folks that are going in and they're continuing to steal from these businesses. Our SPEAR team, which is assigned under investigations, stolen property enforcement and recovery, they're focusing on these folks, but you can see the damage on just these 13 stores, $4.5 million. 13 stores up north, that's it. That doesn't include downtown, that doesn't include Division, that doesn't include any of those others. So this is something, again, that adds up, especially when you look at it all over the city as well. I want to talk about offenders real quick. This was a study done by Washington State University, Dr. Macon. He actually did this with Tacoma Police Department under contract, looking at property crimes. I'm just putting this up there so you can see what the name of his study is. The important thing to point out is what his study does, peer reviewed. Again, this is someone who's a researcher and wants to make sure if he's putting out a report, it's peer reviewable, which means it will pass for credibility. Says that career burglary research conducted in the early 80s, which again, this researcher says is still valid, has supported lengthy careers by these offenders originating from the early onset. What is very telling is, says, in fact, on average, the offending histories displayed ranges at the lowest, almost 99 offenses, to a high of 204 burglaries per year per offender. And again, you look at 1982, but he says it is still considered valid. So hundreds of burglaries from a lot of our repeat offenders. The lowest was 98. This is a report from the RAND Corporation. Again, I just put that up there so you can see where I got the information from. Let's talk about the cost of crime. We talked about the cost of a new jail, very expensive, but how much does crime cost? And these are three different researchers who look at what the average total cost is of these different crime categories you see on the left. That's damage. We'll talk vehicle thefts for a minute. That's time lost from work, loss of vehicle, damage to the vehicle, police officer time, prosecutor time, public defender or defense attorney time, judge time. So when you're looking at this report on the crime index, again, these are all researchers, every single vehicle theft on average is $9,000. Every single larceny on average is costing the community $2,100. A burglary, $13,000 on average per burglary. And you can see the list just goes up. And again, this is lost wages, lost time from work, all of the above. Crime is very expensive. And these researchers are some folks who took the time to actually delve into what is the actual costs. And you can see the range up there as well. This is from the, and again, pardon me for bouncing all over. This is from the Drug Enforcement Agency. This is a document they came out with earlier this year. I put this up here because what they show right here is in a 1-year period for 12 months ending October of last year, 105,000 Americans died of drug overdose. That's more people than died in all of the entire Vietnam War from beginning to end, 105,000. If we had an enemy invading our country and killing 105,000 Americans every day, I feel like we would probably be doing a lot more to stop this than what we are. 2/3 of those deaths are fentanyl related. I will tell you, in Spokane, fentanyl is clearly a big issue. Meth is still a big issue here as well. This is further exacerbated, right? Because Washington State last year, based on the Blake decision, in essence, has said that enforcement of narcotics violations is a low priority, and so low that we're going to refer the first 2 times and you're going to get a citation and sent on your way the 3rd time. If you are 18 years old and you're downtown with an open container beer, you're going to get charged as an 18-year-old for minor possession of alcohol. If you're an 18-year-old downtown and you have Mexi pills, heroin, cocaine, meth, you have a baggie, we're just going to take that from you and we're going to send you on your way. So it is just, if you're, and again, I've never done steroids, Scouts Honor, but if you do steroids or you have steroids in your possession, that is a felony. You are going to jail. But if you have meth, heroin, cocaine, Mexi pills on you, you're not going to jail. So again, some of the irony in some of these things. This here is actually a 5-year, you can find this in a report put together by Senator Padden and several others, but he got the data. If you'll see up at the bottom, which I think I snipped out, this is from WASPIC, the Washington State, again, Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Association. They are the repository for every agency to forward their crime data to WASPIC. WASPIC goes through, scrubs it to make it clean, and then sends it to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., as do hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of cities and communities across the state. So this is all scrubbed data. And what I wanted to point out is when we're looking at the 5-year change from 15 to 20, again, we don't have 2021's crime data yet. You'll see the increase in murders, rapes, robberies, aggravated, everything. If you look on the right, you'll see the increases in everything: motor vehicle theft, burglary, destruction of property, fraud, human trafficking, weapons violations. Everything in the last 5 years has absolutely exploded. Okay, this was a report written last September. Well, it was published last September by Senator Padden, Senator Wagner, and Senator Gilden. I'm going to highlight some pieces in here, but I want to tell you, I am not going over this to be political. I will tell you, I make great effort to be apolitical. But what I do want to cover in this report, which you all can find online, prison alarm bells sounding, is what's going on at the state level. And we all know what goes on at the state level has a huge impact on what happens here in Spokane. So this report talks about everyone's heard of 3 strikes, you're out. So this passed with 75% of the vote. So you are seeing that the law related to what counts as a strike is being diminished. So the things that used to count as 3 strikes don't count as 3 strikes anymore in some areas because the law changes. The graduated reentry program, it allows the Department of Corrections to basically take inmates and then move them into transitional housing for up to 6 months. So you can have an inmate that can serve the last 6 months of their prison sentence in the communities as well. You're looking at over 3,000 prisoners that were released through the graduated reentry program, and there's efforts to release some more of these prisoners as well. Then we're looking at you'll see here in the middle, the downturn in prison population. So you'll see that prisons are closing and consolidating. The state lost 3,300 prison beds, and they said they're trying to save $80 million per biennium. And the reason I want to point that out is if you look at the cost of crime, how much crime is being committed and what's the damage to the community in dollar values versus that $80 million as well. So what they've noticed here is you've seen an artificially created crisis. So what they do is prisons are expensive, incarceration is expensive. So they will shut down wings of certain prisons, and then they will move prisoners to other prisons, and then they will say it's overcrowded. And because it's overcrowded, we have to release prisoners because we can't have these prisoners in overcrowded prisons. That's what he means when the authors mean when they're saying artificially created crisis. And you'll see that. I'm not sure if I can get to this. So when you're talking about Washington State, about 31% of offenders commit new crimes within 3 years of being released. However, when you're looking at you'll see here that some of what they're looking at is the success rate of this graduated reentry program. What the authors are saying here is when you presented that data, you did not give a full 3 years, which is pretty much the standard to give 3 years to see if they recidivate or not, instead of the shorter duration that they used on those who served their full sentence versus those who were part of the graduated reentry. And let me see here. Okay. So, and again, you'll see that in this report, you'll see that the Department of Corrections is losing staffing and cutting jobs on the front line as well. Here are some of the sentencing bills in the Washington legislature from 2018 to 2021 that, again, negatively impacted public safety. You'll see, obviously, the drug law is the #1 law listed there. Expand the graduated reentry program. Again, that means let's get some folks out of prison sooner than what they otherwise would. You'll see the 3 strikes persistent offenders law is being changed. Robbery second is no longer counts as a 3rd strike. Positive achievement time, community custody. That means for good behavior, we're going to move you out into the community. Many of our crimes have a third of the sentence lopped off at the very front end at sentencing for good behavior. You'll see that sanctions for violations of probation or parole is they're removing a tiered response, which means there's less higher level violations as well. Again, this talks some more about the graduated reentry program, folks getting released out of prison before they've served their sentence. So here's one thing, and then I'll be just about done with this report. On average, the 3-year recidivism rate is 31%. And then it explains right there, 31% can be expected to be charged with a new crime within 3 years. However, prisoners released under the governor's program, it was claimed we're on track for the state average, but DOC's own report issued in June of 2021 indicated of the 422 prisoners who had their sentences commuted, 35% have been returned to confinement for community custody violations. 35% is obviously above the 31%. 21% have active warrants for the arrest, and 6 have been jailed pending adjudication on new felony charges. So what they're showing here is that the aggregate failure of the commuting these sentences is 64% recidivism versus 31% on those who've had their sentences commuted. And this is from Department of Corrections' own data. And then when we're looking at the closure of state prisons as well, you'll see that as the state population has increased, right here, you'll notice these bars going up. The inmate population has decreased by 4,000 as well. So again, we're getting more people, but we're getting more people out of jail. And again, I won't go through all of this with you, but basically it talks again about the jail population being, or the prison population being down. It goes into a lot more detail on that as well. And again, that's that article there. Again, in closing, I just want to remind you about the crime cost index and the increase you're seeing on the far right over the last 5 years. And I apologize for going through that so quickly. I was trying to get all that in under 20 minutes. So.
You did well, really well with a lot of information. I want to follow up real quickly with a question from Chris Patton regarding Senate Bill 5476. Can you confirm whether fentanyl was included in that bill along with crack, heroin, and meth?
In terms of giving 2 referrals the first time?
Yes.
Yes, yes, that is in there as well. That's my understanding.
Okay. All right. And then real quickly, one more before we turn it over to Larry. And that is, yesterday, my son is a junior at Lewis and Clark High School. And yesterday they had an incident down there. And from my understanding, there was some confusion that occurred. I see Dave Van Hersen on there too, and he's got 2 boys there. And there was some confusion in regards to, does law enforcement respond when they're called? I heard there are multiple 911 calls regarding this quasi riot, I guess. And then what happens and why do they get called off? And so where are we at relationship wise between SPD and SPS?
Yeah, so the initially officers received a call of a large fight. They started to respond. Shortly afterwards, dispatchers received a second call and they were disregarded. However, the officers were close. My understanding is they decided to respond anyways. In the process of them responding anyways, they received another call saying, no, we still need you. And when they arrived, there were still multiple fights going on. And I know just from watching the news, one of the teachers said it was like something out of a movie. She said it felt like a prison riot. So our officers still responded. There may end up being some criminal charges for some of the students that were there. Obviously, the worst of the worst is the ones that are going to be charged. In terms of relationships with the school district, I will say that we definitely have a lot of room for improvement. We have a youth and police initiative at the high schools where we rotate from one high school to the next every month. Take 12 to 15 students picked by principals, counselors, and they would participate in this program for 1 week after school. And the intent was to build bridges. And a lot of these kids were high-risk kids, and they were identified by school staff. Prior to COVID and just about the time COVID occurred, that program stopped within the schools. We have asked to bring it back to the schools, and we were told that we may end up doing it. If we do it, though, we won't be doing it in the schools. We will bus our students to a different location. But of course, most people know there's also an FBI review going on as well. So the relationship is unfortunately, I would say, fractured. It's not irreparably fractured. I think it's something that can be healed, but I also know we do have to get through this FBI review. And then my hope is that we can start working together. I will tell you, we all want our kids to go to school and be safe. And I will tell you, based on the experience of our officers, there are some kids who just don't want to be at school, but they're going to show up to school. And my fear is, and this is based on once this investigation or review became public knowledge, people came out of the woodwork. And sadly, I could share stories. I won't. I can save that for another day. But I think you have a lot of kids that are sitting in class. They're not listening to the teacher. They're wondering, how do I get to my next class without getting beat up? How am I going to get home after school without getting beat up? What am I going to do at lunch today and not get beat up? They're in survival mode at school. They're not in learning mode. So, and again, that's not everybody, but there are too many students that feel that way. And this is just based on the reports I got. So we're hoping we can work with them to find a happy balance between what we all want. We want kids to be restored. We want restorative justice. But there also has to be a willingness on the part of the person who has committed the violation to be restored. And at some point, despite what they're saying, their behavior is going to tell us you don't want to be restored. Despite what you're saying, your behavior is showing that you don't. And so we have to figure out, what do we do with those? Is it fair to the other 25 kids in the class to shut the classroom down, move all the students out while they deal with the one student? So there's a lot of layers of this. I actually am looking forward to improving the relationships with the school districts. And I think we can. I think we will. I just think we have to get past this current review, though.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then just real quickly, is your presentation public? Is that something you would be, can you share with us, or is that?
Yeah. Do you want me to forward it to you, or how would you like?
If you could forward it to me, Chief, that'd be great. And I'll get that out. Michael Plewick asked on that one. And then Bill Hislop asked, have you presented that presentation to the council?
No, this was custom made for your group chat.
Okay, great. Well, I'd encourage you, if they would be so kind to welcome that presentation. I think it's one that they need to see as well. All right, thank you, Chief. Stay around. There might be some more questions, but if you need to, jump off, that's fine too. So let's go over to Spokane County Prosecuting Attorney Larry Haskell was elected into office in November of 2014. He took office at January of 2015. Prior to that, Larry prosecuted a broad range of crimes committed by and against gang members and their associates as a member of the Spokane County Gang Prosecution Unit. Before coming to the Spokane County Prosecutor's Office, Larry was a B-1B pilot and an instructor pilot with the U.S. Air Force. And prior to that, Larry flew B-52 bombers right out of here at Fairchild Air Force Base. Larry received his bachelor's degree from the University of Washington, go Huskies, and he is a 1997 graduate of Seattle University School of Law. One thing I want to say or share before, because I don't know how familiar we all are with the prosecuting's office, but there's more than just a prosecuting. I mean, they have three major departments: the civil department, criminal department, and family law. Civil is the office who serves as a legal advisor to all county departments and agencies and defends and prosecutes civil cases on behalf of the county government. What we're going to hear today is a criminal department, which is where the prosecuting's office handles all criminal prosecutions in the district, superior, and juvenile courts. And then we got the family law, and that's obviously where the office manages child support enforcement, paternity modifications, and bankruptcy. So, Larry, it's an honor to have you on. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to you. You don't need to share screen, do you?
No, I'm going to talk to some of the points that Chief Lytle made and how they affect our office directly and indirectly.
Okay.
So good afternoon, everybody. As Chad indicated, I am the county prosecuting attorney. I've been in office now almost 8 years and been prosecuting in Spokane area since 1998. We've been feeling much of the same types of pressures based on some of the legislative decisions that have been made. And the national phenomenon of the increase in crime, both violent and property crime, has been the trend in Washington state as well. I have a certain limited number of prosecutors to handle the prosecution function. And of course, they're very, very busy because the numbers are up. There was a definite impact, and we can talk about it, and I'll answer questions about it if there are any, about the Blake decision. The Blake decision was out of a Spokane case. It was a bench trial for possession amounts of illegal drugs. And the defense was unwitting possession, and the judge didn't believe the defendant and convicted the defendant following the bench trial. It worked its way through the appellate system, got to the Supreme Court, and they declared the possessory statute as unconstitutional. Now, the court had a chance to call it what they call a new statutory interpretation and have it apply to prospective cases only, but they declared it unconstitutional, which made it retroactive. And across the state, we're dealing with 35,000 prior convictions that are being vacated by the 39 county prosecuting attorneys' offices with the help of the courts and with the help of the local defense bar, as well as the clerk's office, because the legal financial obligations that had accrued and some of which have been paid are going to have to be paid back. And that's a whole nother wicket that the state is working through right now. And many of these people are either in prison still, or they're going to get their offender scores reduced and get their sentences reduced. And my office is handling those as rapidly as they come in. And there's still lots of them out there that we haven't gotten to yet. And I notice also that Chief Meidel said that it's essentially drug possession has essentially been decriminalized. It has, but it hasn't. So the first two are diverts, as the chief pointed out, and the subsequent offenses can be prosecuted. The legislature actually encourages prosecutors to continue to divert those. There are specific instances where I've asked my deputies to prosecute the subsequent ones, wherein, say, if somebody has a series of felonies that would otherwise wash without a conviction, we're going to prosecute those at the misdemeanor level, which is what they are. They took it out of the felony qualification and made it a misdemeanor. We've also seen and feel the impact of the increase in violent crime. As everyone knows, there seems to be a shooting every other night in Spokane County somewhere. And this is, I think, a product of the legislative message that's being sent in terms of the drug decision from the state Supreme Court. And then the legislature's response to it was not to adjust the statute so that it could meet constitutional muster, but in fact to reduce the penalties for straight possession of a controlled substance. And the irony is, as the chief pointed out, certain other things that you can have are going to be citable and prosecutable, wherein some of these drug offenses are not, or if they are, it'll be a third or subsequent and only at the misdemeanor level. We have had just an unbelievable explosion in homicides. We had 19 or 20 in the last couple of years, and we're on pace for something very similar in this year. There was a day when the major crimes deputies here in the office carried a couple of homicides each, and now a lot of the major crimes deputies are carrying 4 or 5 homicides on their caseload. And as you know, the very serious offense, it takes a long time to put that investigation together, and it takes a long and sometimes a very difficult road with witnesses that don't want to participate for reasons that you are all aware of, because they're worried about being caught up in it themselves if they've been identified as witnesses. On the strikes, I have been telling people publicly that in my view, the legislature is accomplishing a very slow but methodical elimination, if not great reduction, on the SRA, which is the Sentencing Reform Act, which was passed originally, and it's been amended many times, but it was passed originally in the 1980s. And they did take away Rob 2. So back in the day, we used to settle a Rob 1 as a plea bargain to get Rob 2 out of it, because we knew that that was still a strike offense, and that it was, if this person's first or second strike, hopefully we wouldn't see them again. But if they did show up again with a strike offense charged, then they could be put in for their third strike, which would be a mandatory life without parole. I testify frequently at the legislature, sometimes on specific invitation and sometimes on my own initiation, because I want to be able to be heard as representing the prosecutor's office here in Spokane. And what I hear when I go to the legislature or I participate in Zoom meetings, as we are here today, and we do so often because the convenience sometimes just can't be beat. The trip to Olympia is long. But what I'm seeing is the activist groups that are pushing the legislature for the soft on crime, stop mass incarceration, and some of the philosophies that exist out there. And they're very, very successful at it. They're highly organized and they communicate with one another, particularly the anti-gun lobby, such as it is. But when I listen to discussion, particularly about the removal of second-degree robbery as a strike offense, it really wasn't a lot of discussion about second-degree robbery. It was a very, very more in detail discussion about the fact that they don't want life without parole in the state of Washington. And that's really what the ultimate goal is. And rumor is, and I haven't seen a bill yet, but that at some point in time, assault in the second degree will be the next offense that's currently a strike offense that'll be on the chopping block. And I like to remind the legislature as they go along that, the three strike legislation was actually an initiative from the people asking for having three strikes. And a lot of people ask me, they say, gee, how can somebody be out of jail and they have, 15 felony convictions? Well, the strike list of offenses is much smaller than is the felony list. And many, in fact, burglary in the first degree is the only strike offense for the most part in property crimes at that. Most of the others are obviously crimes against persons. But it's a very short list of offenses. And the way the rule works, you got to have committed a strike, been found guilty, serve your time. And then once you're out, that strike is essentially complete. And then if you commit another strike, go through the same process. So if somebody commits over a period of several months, several strike offenses in separate incidents, if they're all resolved together, or even if they're tried together, they're only going to get one strike out of it because of the fact that they got to have been convicted, served their time, and then have been released for the strike offense essentially to be complete. We've suffered along with the police departments with the lack or the reducing ability of the police in terms of what they can do and what circumstances they need to have to be able to affect what used to be more aggressive police actions. There's an adjustment period, but I think that the local departments that we work with, which include the sheriffs as well as Spokane police, and then the smaller police departments throughout the county, they're making adjustments to it. But again, so are the defendants. They're adjusting to it as well. And you're seeing, as the chief pointed out, increasing resistance and basically kind of an attitude towards the police because they know that they're more limited in what they can and can't do. But nonetheless, I'm going to continue to lobby the legislature and try to get them to understand the needs of the Spokane County residents, at least, and our police departments and what we're seeing, and try to get legislative response consistent with the need to take hard looks at these numbers, which are going up pretty much on all fronts, some a little more than others, but violent crime, property crime are both up, as the chief pointed out. So we feel it here in our office as well, and we're doing everything we can to hold offenders accountable, offer treatment options where they're appropriate. And there comes cases when the best thing we can do to protect the community is put them in a Department of Corrections for their treatment. And then they only have one thing to concentrate on, and that is to get better. So I don't know how many questions are in there or if anybody has any.
Thanks, Larry. I think I got a couple here. There's some around the drug possession piece, and I'd like to follow up with you on Sulani, Madsen. What would have to happen to make drug possession illegal again?
Well, it's not, technically not been legalized. Legalized is different than diversion of the first couple. But what the legislature would have to do is if they wanted to make it a felony again, and if they wanted to take away, because it was the legislature that actually responded to the Blake decision with the divert the first two, give them a pamphlet, take the drugs and let them go. And then again, for the third offense, it is prosecutable at the misdemeanor level, but we prosecutors are being encouraged to divert those as well. Essentially, what the legislature has done is they've allowed for prosecution at the misdemeanor level on the third or subsequent, but they're really kind of frowning on it. So they would have to write law that would, make it a little bit more stringent. If they wanted to make it a felony again, they could, but they would have to address the constitutional issue that the legislature, that the Supreme Court had pointed out. And what they would have to do is actually codify a defense of unwitting possession. And I believe there were some drafts of legislation that would have done this, but they all failed, and we got the one that we have in effect right now.
Okay, thank you. And am I correct? Is it a 2-year pilot program? Is it?
I don't have the specifics on that in front of me. I can certainly get back with you, Chud. Okay. But I don't know for certain if it's a pilot.
Do you know, Chief?
There you go. Yeah, it is. So in 2 years, the law passed that the state will expire, which means then we default to the court ruling, which then means there's no enforcement. So by the time the 2 years is up from when that bill was passed. Okay, did anyone hear anything I said?
No, we got most of it. I don't know what happened. Mine muted on me too. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. So yeah, in 2 years, that law will expire from when the bill was made law. So if nothing happens within that 2 years and expires, we default to the court ruling, which in essence is it's not illegal. There's no sanction because there will be no law in the book. So the legislators have until 2 years from that bill was filed to come up with either say we're going to keep doing this or come up with a different proposal.
Okay, I appreciate that. And another follow-up under this one, and this is probably more for you, Chief, is the drug dealers in homeless camps. So from what I've been told, I've heard that there is quite a bit of drug dealing going down at Camp Hope. And with this new legislation, we are not allowed for undercover work. Is that correct? Or how can you sort of discuss how undercover work would occur or could occur?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Larry could definitely weigh in on this as well. So one of the best ways that we use to get dealers, which obviously the ultimate goal is always get dealers because they have such a bigger ripple effect. So if you can get dealers into custody and behind bars, that's one hub that you've now taken off the street. So it's the PCS isn't obviously as big of a priority, although when it was illegal, we still arrest them. Most drug dealers are not going to sell to someone they don't know. We call them, like a cold shot, where you go up, they don't know anyone because they know that it's a felony if they deal. No matter how much they deal, if they deal, period, it is a felony. They can be arrested for distribution of controlled substance or possession of controlled substance with intent to deliver. So they will deal to people they know, or they may deal with someone they know who vouches for someone else. And it was fairly common for us to be able to work with those who were arrested for just what we'd call a simple PCS, possession of controlled substance. to say, you know what, we are willing to help you work off these charges and make a proposal to the prosecutor's office that they dismiss charges, but you got to help us out. You got to help us go after these dealers. And so because they were known by the dealers, because they were drug users, they were able to make those purchases that no one else can. Since drug is in essence, again, Larry hit the nail on the head. We can't say in fairness it's been decriminalized, but the third contact is obviously a misdemeanor ticket. There's no incentive for anyone to approach the dealers anymore, and having police officers do the cold shots is very, very challenging, to say the least. So we lost an important tool as well of being able to penetrate a lot of these dealers, and especially, you know, the homeless camps as well, because they don't want to go to, you know, they're smart enough to realize, I don't know you, I'm not going to sell to you. With CIs that had bought from them in the past, they almost always would.
All right, thanks, Chief. One more, and then we'll move on from drugs. This is from Dennis Cronin. How does the new law interplay with federal crime, drug possession, and law enforcement in Spokane?
Well, I can tell you that you know, I was down at the U.S. Attorney's Office for a while, about a year, and then I was SALSA, Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, for 3 years. They typically won't get involved in the low-level dealing. The cost of federal prosecution is very high, and they look for generally for the bigger bang for your buck. You're not going to have very many street-level dealers because of the guidelines that drive the federal prosecution and the penalties. Very frequently, those types of dealers are not the ones that they're looking to spend the valuable federal resources on. And but I have approached the new U.S. Attorney, Vanessa Waldrop, and asked her to explore with us the envelope a little bit more than we have, and to have greater cooperation between her office and ours, so that we can synergize the resources that we have and protect the community better. But I do know that overall, street level dealing isn't going to get a high level of interest unless there's some other thing involved. Like, for instance, if there's a firearm involved, which, as we know, generally speaking, if you're dealing drugs, you're going to find a way to protect it, and that's usually with a firearm. If this person could be ACC, which is Armed Career Criminal Qualified, then that would spark a federal interest right there. And then, of course, they'd probably take the drugs along with it, depending. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and I will continue to engage with the U.S. Attorney's Office to help us to protect this community together.
Chief, a question for you. This is from Sheldon Jackson. Can you explain how the new task force will remediate the increase in violent and nonviolent crime that we are experiencing?
Yeah, so much like many police departments across the nation, we have a lot of vacancies, and we're struggling to fill the vacancies, or we have positions filled, but just because of some level of training or injury, we're not able to use the 356 commissioned officers we have. We are a call-driven agency, which means when an officer logs on for the shift and turns on the computer, there's a screen full of calls. So they're going call to call to call to call. And in the process of going to those calls, there's more calls coming in as well. So what we know is that our patrol officers, and I'm oversimplifying this, I will acknowledge that, they're basically following around, taking damage reports of crime that has already occurred. And again, I am oversimplifying that because they do request warrants, they'll track down the suspects, et cetera. But one of the things that we also want to do is have a unit that is not tied to the radio, tied to having to go to calls, that can try to get the worst of the worst, our repeat offenders, our violent offenders. So we have the major crimes unit, and with all the, as Larry pointed out, with all the homicides and violent crimes, in sexual assaults, and they're redlining. We have our Safe Streets Task Force. It's under the umbrella of the FBI. They work heavily with gangs. They do some drugs as well, but they're focused primarily on gangs. So there's this middle area, and that's where the Violent Crimes Task Force comes in. We took 5 officers and 2 sergeants. Currently, they're going through training on how to work with different populations, proper protocols in these types of investigations, because there's certain laws you obviously have to follow. But their job is to, one, they're not tied to the radio, but go out and find who are our violent offenders. And going back to the guns, because as someone pointed out, we have a lot of shootings now, drive-bys in shootings where they're not necessarily targeting anyone, but they're shooting the guns in the air and such. So we want them to go after those, and we want them to go after our repeat offenders, especially our violent ones. Now, when you want to take guns off the street in Spokane, you don't just go up and just start grabbing people and taking guns off them. You usually have to get at them through drug crimes or property crimes. So the folks that are involved in those have guns, and the amount of guns they have on them are through the roof. I'll tell you, and real quick, just a story I heard yesterday about it. Officers were contacting some of the homeless downtown that were blocking the sidewalk. And obviously that's a concern for businesses. They want the sidewalks open. So they contacted one individual and uncooperative, and it looked like he had a knife on him, and ended up fleeing, lied about his name, ended up fleeing. Officers pursued him, and the knife was actually a firearm that looked like a knife from the clip on the outside, but inside the pocket, it was obviously a firearm. So we're seeing guns everywhere. And so we're going to use our Violent Crimes Task Force to go after them, whether it's through violent crimes they've committed or property crimes. And that's going to be their focus.
Great, thanks, Chief. Larry, this one would be for you. And it goes back to a little bit what you've discussed, and that's we're having a tough time understanding the thought process behind letting repeat offenders back on our streets to reoffend. Can you explain why these repeat offenders are released? And does this have anything to do with the discretionary decisions affecting sentences? I think you touched on that a little bit, but
Sure. Well, we've had that discussion recently as we've been talking about this concept of a supported release program here at the misdemeanor level. The court rule that governs the decisions that judicial officers make is CRR 3.2. And typically the things that are in there include the likelihood that the person will reappear for court or not, and the likelihood that they might commit another crime while they're out, as well as their history, criminal history, warrant history, ties to the local community. Are they employed, and or do they have some family in the area, and just a whole host of things that the judges are supposed to consider. And the court rule hasn't changed in a long time, but what has changed is the philosophy in its application. In addition, we also have an organization in the area known as the Bail Project, and the magic number for them to potentially get involved is a bail of $5,000 or less. So judges are well aware of that, and I have heard some comments from the bench as relayed to me by some of my deputies that well, we try to get this down to 5,000, that sort of thing. And to me, it should be driven by the court rule and not the bailability of an organization to provide the bail for someone. There's either a safety risk that's sufficient for a higher bail or there's not. But prosecutors, and I've asked my prosecutors to do a couple of things. One is argue for appropriate bail based on how you view the factors in CRR 3.2, the history, and we get a good report on that on each individual from pretrial services. So we actually have it at our fingertips for the most part. But ultimately, a judicial officer makes a bail determination, whether there will be bail or whether there will be in the district court supported release or whether there will be an OR. That's all up to the judge. The other thing that we do is when we ask for a bail that is higher than is given, I've asked my deputies to create a form that gets filed into the court file so that when we subsequently get asked, and I say we, it's usually me, who gets asked, hey, how come this person got such a low bond? I can look that up and I can go to the court file online and I can look at the document that was filed and I could say, well, my deputy asked for 50,000, the judge gave 5,000, and they posted bail. And since it is a public record, the name of the judicial officer that made the decision will be in the document, because it's very easy to lose track of those things 6 months down the road when they're out and they committed another crime. And now somebody wants to know why they're out and why their bail was so low. But again, the court rule hasn't changed in a long time, but the application of it, the philosophy of application has changed.
Okay, along the same lines, and the question was sort of a statement and a question. It's really for both of you. We followed multiple crimes from the citizens doing their job, calling 911 and reporting to SPD, who did their job, arresting the individual, then to the prosecutor's office, who did their job prosecuting, and then we lose all visibility, and the criminal arrested is right back on the street. The judges and commissioners are using the confidential laws to avoid providing an explanation on why. Is this the judges, commissioners making a unilateral decision, or is this a problem out of Olympia, or both?
Well, there's rules that apply to judges that don't apply to prosecutors, and there's rules that apply to prosecutors that don't apply to defense lawyers or law enforcement. Judges have a whole entire judicial code of conduct that they follow, and for the most part, are not allowed to make any comments about those kinds of things. What typically will happen is, and I tell people this, and it's just a fact of life in the criminal justice system. And people talk about, well, we get criticized whether we plea or sometimes even if we go to trial. No matter which way you go, there's going to be some people that are unhappy about it. But typically, if a case goes to trial, most of the time it's going to be a jury trial. Everybody has a jury trial as a matter of right. They can waive it if they choose to, but typically they don't. And when the jury deliberates and they reach a verdict, I can tell you this, it's in open court. The rules are very, very specific to a judge. The judge has to make a specific record to close a court. And many people can walk right into any courtroom on any given day, and it's open, and you can sit in the back and listen to what's going on, and you can observe a trial. There was a gentleman, his name was Tony, I don't remember his last name, but he saw a lot of trials and was as experienced as most of us at the ongoings inside the courtroom. After the trial, there's a sentencing date that is set. That's also generally open. The date is set at the time of the verdict, and it's usually within 40 court days, which is what the law requires unless waived by the accused. And that's open. After that, they'll go off to prison or wherever. They'll either serve local time or they'll go off to the Department of Corrections, and that's why you don't hear anything really about it. But when it's public record, we can talk about it, and you can do what we call a public records request under Washington state law and get certain records, or you can go to the clerk's office and ask for the file, and you can actually look at it. You can't take it away if you're just a member of the general public, but you can get copies of public documents in there for a fee from the clerk's office. And a lot of people do that as well. The news media is always there looking into the files, and you can too.
Right. Thanks, Larry. I don't know, Chief, if you have anything you want to add, or keep moving.
No, when it comes to what they can and can't say, I definitely would defer to Larry. Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to give you back most of your Friday afternoon. A couple more questions, and then I think we'll put a closure to it. This one's coming from Spokane Valley Council Member Brandy Peets. It's to either of you. Has the discussion included gang injunctions and legislation to add this tool so we can make gang activity illegal?
I can start on that. We actually have in the statutes right now, we have what they call aggravators. And depending on the circumstances, a prosecutor will go down the list of aggravators when they're making their charging decisions, and doing certain activities as a member of a street gang can get you additional time. It's something, again, it becomes an element of the crime. It has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So which means the jury is going to have to be convinced of it. And there's aggravators on DUIs for a child in the car under 16. So there's a host of them. So in the appropriate cases, we will look at the list of statutory aggravators in the SRA, and we will file those as appropriate, and then seek the conviction from the jury, and then get those applied.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, I would just add there's a bill proposed earlier this year to remove drive-by as an aggravator on an assault car calls. So in other words, drive-bys that aggravator would be released. That did not pass, thankfully. I don't know that there's a desire or intent necessarily right now to strengthen any of that. And if I've seen anything, it's probably to go the opposite direction.
Okay, this Chief, this is for you. A couple questions, really around your the department in regards to recruiting and retention. Are there factors at the state level that are driving Washington law enforcement agencies accelerating retention problems? More retirements than commissionings is the question. And along those lines, what can be done at the state or local level to try and reverse Washington having possibly the lowest officer to civilian ratio in the country?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we do, if you include Washington, D.C., we're 51st in the nation of officers per capita. The national average is 2.4 officers per thousand. We're hovering right around 1.5, 1.6 in the city, but the state as a whole is definitely below the national average. And again, I'm just going to speak, pardon my expression, I'm going to speak my truth. I'm not trying to be political. I'm not trying to pour fuel on the fire. I'm not trying to aggravate anything. But law enforcement has been going through a very challenging time for the last 2 years. Defund, reimagine, eliminate, the BLM movement, all of those created just a pall over law enforcement across the nation. I had a gentleman in my office that I'd worked with years ago from Arkansas. He said a state trooper in the Midwest said the exact same thing. The constant rhetoric at the national level has led to that level of resistance and obstinance across the nation at a level we just haven't seen before. And you saw it on the video. The videos I showed you where they're crashing into cars. The one individual's arguing with an officer for several minutes. He's got several warrants for his arrest. That's just an example. And the 52-year-old officer that walked into my office and said, everyone wants to fight now. And I think it just, a lot of it has to do, again, with the national rhetoric that we heard for years and years. One of my staff members made a comment, you know, it feels like there was a systemic effort to take our dignity away from us. And officers joined this job to protect the community. It sounds Pollyannic, but it is the truth. It's why I became a police officer. It's why the overwhelming majority became police officers, to protect the community. And while we're certainly not looking for people to stand on the top of a mountain and cheer how great and amazing we are, we're also not looking to be demonized. And so that's what we saw for 2 years. Also complicated because of COVID, because of the lockdowns, pressures for law enforcement to get involved in, you know, enforcing, arresting, charging people who weren't wearing masks. And, you know, we're seeing these violent felonies and repeat offenders being released. So seeing a lot of pressure on top of that. So then all of a sudden comes along all of the state reforms in Washington state. And unarguably, the reforms that were passed last year, and I need to acknowledge many of them have been pulled back. That just poured fuel on the fire to where officers felt like they were being demonized. And again, I participated in a lot of the discussions with the legislators, and I was hearing these stories from truly activists. And again, they have the right to tell their story. But these anomalies, these officers who we would all agree engaged in inappropriate conduct, were being played over and over and over again, even though we acknowledge this person should not be an officer. They should not have done that. That was inappropriate. So it just created the perfect storm, the national and then at the state level. But I also need to add, I was talking to one of our business 501c3 directors last week. He said he has 39 vacancies right now he can't fill. I was talking to, we had a bank donate to our police foundation. She said she can't find bank tellers, people that want to work at the bank. Law enforcement is the same. Our fire department is the same as well. So it's not just law enforcement, but I will tell you that I feel like it's more intensely felt with law enforcement. So as far as what do we do to fix that, it's really, I think what we're looking for is really that community support. And I tell our officers, we have it in Spokane. We absolutely know we have it. Over 80% of community supports the department. I pointed out how just 3 years ago, the city voted to tax themselves more to hire more officers. A city does not willingly vote to have money taken out of their pocket for something they don't like. But since they did that during the levy, that right there, that's more powerful than anything that they could say. So constantly trying to remind them of how much the community appreciates them. But it's all also tied into, again, going back to the reforms, but even before the reforms, Senator Padden's report talking about how we're shutting down prisons, we're releasing prisoners, and we're arresting the same people over and over again. As frustrated as many of the community members are on this WebEx right now with Zoom, our officers are more frustrated because they're dealing with the exact same people. They live in the community. They want to go out on the weekends and go to the same places we all go to, and they're frustrated by it as well. So everyone wants to feel relevant, every single one of us, regardless of what your job is. And if they feel like they're not relevant, and especially if they're being demonized, it just creates this cloud over law enforcement. So I think support from our electeds is huge, and I can't overstate the fact of having our electeds come out and talk about how we appreciate our law enforcement. We know they're necessary. We need them, and again, we'll acknowledge the inappropriate conduct from the bad officers as well. But when that feels like, you know, it's 90% of the conversation, it causes officers to say, you know, why am I doing this? You know, there's something else I could be doing. And again, they're not asking for everyone to call them heroes. They're just not looking to be demonized either.
Can I add something, Chad, and ask the chief a question as well? And that is, Chief, do you track the number of citizen contacts that your department makes annually?
We do.
I think that's an important thing for people to know, how many that actually is relative to, like you said, some of these stories that get repeated and repeated over and over.
Yeah, we always track complaints. Everyone knows that. We have tracked our complaints for decades. One of the things I noticed probably 5 or 6 years ago is like, why aren't we tracking our commendations? It feels like we get a lot more commendations than complaints. And just so you know, if someone wants to comment, you give an officer commendation, it takes the same amount of effort as a complaint. You have to find an email address, you have to find a phone number, you have to go to a website, you have to dig through multiple menus. So the amount of effort for accommodation is pretty darn close to the same for a complaint. And we average typically at least 3 times as many commendations. And when you think about most people, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too, you say, well, why am I going to give him a commendation? He just did his job. But when you think about the fact that we do get 3+ times as many commendations, I think it's just a testament to what great officers we do have.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both for your public service and commitment to Spokane. You know, keeping the community safe is all what we all want. And I want to close with a couple things. One, we're going to be June 2nd with Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. A lot of what we just heard is going to have relevance with what he's going to present next month. In addition, I will send out a follow-up email. If you want to forward it, please feel free to forward it. A recording of today's Zoom will be in it, as well as once I get the chief's presentation, I'll have that in there as well, so it'll be shared with you. But this is coming from Bill Hislop, and I think it's a great thing because this is entertaining, but what do we do with entertainment? Let's turn it into action, and I think it's something that we can. So, Chief and Mr. Prosecutor, what can this group of citizens do to support law enforcement and to promote the safety and security of our community? And we're here for you, so lean on us.
You know, I think a couple of things. I would say one, be involved. And here's the challenges. If the overwhelming majority of us want to go to work hard, earn a living, and go back to our families and our loved ones and hang out, and on the weekends disengage. But there's so much going on behind the scenes, and I'll say especially at the state level, there are so many bills, and there's so many bills that pop forward in from January to about March or April, and it really does guide the rest of the state. So one, I would say it's so important to stay involved and link up with people who will send out that information. I know there are organizations out there who will send that information out, and then be heard. And again, by being heard, not just a one and done, you know, I sent an email, phone calls, appearing at different forums, having your voice heard. It takes time and energy, but while we're living our life and trying to achieve the American dream, there are a lot of other folks out there that have a lot more energy and time than we do, that are really driving a lot of the policy. And unless that void is filled by our voices, the only voices are going to be those who want to take the state and the city a direction that most of us don't want to go. So you have to be heard and you have to be persistent.
Thank you. Good words of wisdom.
And if I could add to that briefly, Chad, you know, the legislature, the statewide legislature is the closest level of government statewide to the people, and it is your government. They work for you. Make sure they're working for you. Make sure that they hear your voice. And the other thing too is if you don't like the numbers, because right now it's numbers, right, in the legislature. If you want to change that dynamic, you have to vote. You have to get other people to vote. In any election in Spokane County, in any election, even in the heavy years where there's a presidential race or there's a lot of hot button issues and that sort of thing, a third of the people or more will not vote. And I can tell you that 33 or so percent of the vote that's not coming in could change the direction to a trajectory that would more suit what it is that you're looking for. So leaning in on the legislature and making sure you exercise that fundamental right to have your voice heard in the form of your vote. If you don't think it matters, or if someone tells you that my vote doesn't matter, that sort of thing, I can tell you, I sit on the canvassing board for the county, and the number of hand recounts, or recounts in general, but hand recounts sometimes, people are, winning or losing races by 4 votes, 5 votes. So they do matter, and they add up. And that's how, if you want change, that's how you got to get it. That's the way that it works. And I would encourage you to talk to your members, to talk to your friends, family, and if you want changes in the vector that the legislature is on, then that's the way to get it done. Because the groups that are leaning on them in the other direction are very organized, and they're very persistent. So be just as persistent as they are. If you're looking for change, where you'll have to do it that way. So I encourage you to do so.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you both. Thank you for your time. I know we went well over an hour. I wanted to share one little statistic that Julie Humphreys just shared. Julie is the communications director for Spokane Police. And this is a great one. Now, I come from the car business where this is a reverse. Like, yeah, in 2021, SPD had 214 commendations and 82 complaints. That is pretty amazing if you think about it. It was truly a flip. I know Michael Pliwak worked with me in the car business days, and he knows that. We heard more complaints than we did commendations. So anyways, nice job, Chief. Larry, thank you for your service. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope you both got to see all the thank yous in the comments, because you're appreciated and your time's appreciated. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.